So, so Teresa, we're going to be talking to a bunch of podiatrists, and the majority of them are entrepreneurs. And I know you're a coach for Strategic Coach, but you also have your own business and you're an entrepreneur. So I would like you to give maybe the top 3 or 4 type of high level little things that have really helped you in your life to you feel to be successful. I guess being part of coach could be one, but other things that you found beneficial, any books and things like that. Okay.
Perfect. Good.
So I'm going to start with a little intro.
All right.
Hello and welcome to Podiatry Practice Mastery. My name is Don Pelto and I have here Teresa Easler. And Teresa is one of my coach at Strategic Coach, but she's also an entrepreneur and just a friend. So welcome, Teresa.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. So we talked a little bit prior and you are an entrepreneur and you're going to be talking to a lot of docs that are entrepreneurs. And give us kind of some of your best tips. If you were talking to, let's say, someone that was just starting out, maybe been practicing or working for 2 or 3 years, but they're kind of, a lot of them, what I find is they don't have any time. They're working all the time. They have young kids. They're overloaded, just like I was when I got into coach. Like, what are some tips? What are some books? What are some ways people can start?
Well, I would say one of the most important things is establishing your boundaries. Like what do you say yes to and what do you say no to? And particularly if you're new in practice or you're new as an entrepreneur, the tendency is to say yes to everything. You know, you're just trying to bring revenue in the door. So whatever you need to do and however much you've got to do, you're going to do it. And there's a good side of that because it does yield revenue, at least at the beginning. But the bad side of it is that your life gets out of control. And it's very hard to grow a business like that. You cannot scale a business that way. So boundaries are the first thing. What do you say no to? What do you say yes to?
Now, how do people filter out? Is it based on what earns more money? Is it, like, let's say, for example, they want me to be on the board at the hospital. I have to see my own patients. This nonprofit wants my time. You know, my kids, me be a coach for their sports. Are there any tips that you can give people? Like, how do you pick one in each category? How do people determine that? Or what works? What are your thoughts?
Well, one of the things, and this has been the way I've guided myself in this. And there are 2 questions to this day. I mean, I've been an entrepreneur now for almost 40 years, so a really long time that I've worked for myself. And there are 2 questions that even now, after all these years, that I still ask myself. The first is, why am I doing this? So getting really clear about what's the purpose on any kind of obligation or commitment that I make or activity that I engage in, that it's actually supporting a larger goal or a larger strategic plan or a vision, so that it's got to be in sync with that. So why am I doing this? Does it do that? And then the second question are actually the same words, except it's a different emphasis. And that is, why am I doing this? And that being, am I the best? I've decided that this is a good activity or a good initiative or a good thing to do. However, I might not be the right person to do it. And that's where the other piece where we fall into these traps is we get caught up in saying yes. And then we feel overwhelmed. It's like, oh, I wish I hadn't said yes to that. I wish I hadn't said yes to that. I don't have time to do this. And so asking that question, those 2 questions, every time you're going, before you say yes, helps filter out the things that aren't appropriate.
Wow. I think that's great. The setting of boundaries, kind of why am I doing it? And I remember Dan, he talks a little bit about you're over obligated and under committed.
Yes.
And I think sometimes, and there's different phases, I think, of your profession as well. What was good for you maybe when you're starting out? I know when I started, I used to go to BNI and a lot of these other things. But then as I've gotten on, it really didn't fulfill me. I think there's different phases of your career and you have to evaluate where you're at in your career in terms of your your boundaries, and then learning delegation. Well, and that's what you were saying. Why am I doing this? Maybe there's another person that can do. Let's talk about delegation 101. Like you've had virtual assistants over the years. We have employees, but a lot of times there's other things that we need delegated. What are some good resources or tools for delegation?
Well, my rule of thumb is if I don't love to do it, I don't do it. And that's in any aspect of my life. And this is something that I find that parents, as one example, have a really hard time with, because there are some things, particularly in the home life, that you feel like, but I'm supposed to do this. I'm the parent. And if you don't love doing it, either you have to change your point of view about it so that you do love it, or let somebody else do it. And I'll give you an example. I hear from parents all the time, and this is entrepreneurs particularly, who are really stretched thin. It's like, but I have to take this one to soccer practice and this one to ballet, and then there's swimming lessons. And then I have to run back and pick up the other one to take them to their tutor. And it's all basically what you are as a chauffeur. And it feels like it's an obligation. And quite honestly, I didn't do that. I had somebody who did that for me. And when I was with my kids, I was totally with my kids. And I wasn't resentful because I was chasing around all over. Now, my kids are grown. My kids are adults. I have a grandchild, so they've gotten to the other side of it. And I will promise you that they don't feel like they got neglected because other people did a lot of those things for them. They spent, the whole thing, quality time. They spent tremendous amount of quality time on the things that were most important to them.
Wow.
Same thing applies in your work. And if there are, and this is true for me, if I don't like doing it, I find somebody who does love it.
Because now let's talk about that. Just spend a little time. There are people that the stuff you don't like doing, that they love doing it.
Yes. Yeah. It's like they eat it up. Just because we don't like it doesn't mean nobody likes it.
Yeah.
So if I don't like it, I find somebody who loves to do it. It's not that it doesn't get done. It just doesn't get done by me.
Yeah.
And
you've been practicing this, Teresa, for a long time. So for
yes.
those that are just starting out, those are kind of like Alcoholics Anonymous, like the Doers Anonymous. So I'm just going to simplify it for those that are listening to us. You're not going to take 20 things and delegate 20 things. You're going to start with one of the things, like eat the frog, just like what's one of the things that you don't like doing, or what causes you frustration, or which isn't fun, or things like that, right? And then you give it to someone. Now, who are some of these people you could give them to? I don't want to, is it virtual assistants? Is it regular assistants?
There's not one way to set it up. I early on in my entrepreneurial career, I hired an assistant. And I hired somebody part-time. I couldn't imagine what I could keep that person busy doing for 2 days a week. And when I hired this person, the first person, the 2 days very quickly got filled up. And then it's like, oh no, we've got to expand this to full time. And that was, I'm going to say that was about 1990. That I got my first assistant, and I've never looked back. It was like when I got my first cleaning lady to clean my house. It was like, I will go without eating before I won't have somebody clean my house, just because the amount of my time that it takes up doing something that I really don't like, but I have a deep appreciation for having a clean house, giving that away. So to your point, finding, we all have like that place where there's a real pain point. It's like, oh, I just hate doing this. I'm so frustrated. It's, I'm having to work late at night, finishing that up. And every time I do it, I'm just like gritting my teeth. That would be a good place to start. Where those things are that you're so,
Yeah.
gritting your teeth
And,
about.
and you know, a lot of times I know for us, we have a medical assistants, we have office managers. And I just want to tell everyone in my experience, I haven't actually been able to find these people within my practice that can help me do things, because everyone seems like they're already occupied, even if they might not be, but they always say they are. You know, they're busy with their
Right,
current job. And so I've actually had to go out, and I use a couple. I'll just share a couple of names. I use Fancy Hands to do stuff, Upwork, Fiverr. And then most recently, I talked to everyone on my podcast about King. He's my virtual assistant from the Philippines, my latest favorite guy. And he helps me with everything now on like YouTube and all these things that I just didn't like doing, basically. So I
right.
can just make videos and he does all the rest. And he just needs a little bit of guidance. And I'm like, wow, like, I don't know how I did it without him. But so for those that are listening, you might not be able to find within your practice, you know, even with your home, you know, and you can find guys stuff for everything, for your car, for your home
Exactly.
improvements, for your pool, for, you know, everything. And don't feel like, oh, I'm being a snob. You're actually just having a better life. That's what we,
Well, and I think you're making a one really important point is this doesn't mean that you're suddenly employing half of the country
yeah.
to take care of things. Because I operate actually with a really small team. I've in this iteration of my business, I'm in the middle of an experiment to see how big I can grow with a really small team, like being 6 people or under. And because I've had 30 people on in my company, and I know how to do that. And now I'm looking and exploring how I can grow to another level, but a different way. And so a lot of the people that I delegate to are not on payroll, but they are great strategic alliances. They are
Hmm.
great contract workers. I go for, like I said before, is like, I want to find somebody who loves doing what I need to have done.
They'll help you for a
And
specific project.
exactly. And it may not be something that requires a 40-hour work week. I'll give you an example. I have for years been working on converting all of our work into a digital format and providing that kind of learning. And I've worked at it and it's been part of my vision. And finally, I just said, there's nobody on my team who's going to drive this. I'm not going to drive it. I haven't decided, this is important
And I
to
want
me.
it done.
I want it done. So we're not going to get it done. We need to bring somebody else in. And so we did. And they are the project manager on it. They're the one driving it. They're the one who are assigning all of us our duties. And
That's
they
awesome.
bill me for what they do. And the results have been fantastic.
That's
But
awesome.
I held on to it, I held on to it and thought I could do it all myself, or my team could do it. And we didn't get where we wanted to go. So this is, there's, if you think you finally got this all mastered, there's always more to learn is what I've
Yeah.
also found out.
Yeah. Teresa, let's shift gears a little bit. I think we've given people a lot of value talking about delegation and deciding what you're going to do. Let's talk. You're at this other rendition or this other version of your business, which I'm assuming you're kind of working more on something called largest checks, or something that produce these opportunities. And I've been reading and learning a lot lately. Like, we'll talk about patients. There are certain patients that may bring in $65 if we're doing just nail debridement and stuff like that. And there's other patients that might bring in $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. In terms of how do you make that shift from just talking to everyone and just trying to get every single patient under the sun, and then trying to get these superstar patients or these referral sources and things like that? Do you have any tips for us? If you were in our shoes, what would you do?
Wow, that's a really big question. um, the first thing, what would be the first? The first thing is for you always to know where you are right now. So some of that, I find that particularly with entrepreneurs, They have a vision of where they'd like to get to, but they don't know where they are right now. So that's a really important thing, is to understand in what you're talking about is like, what is, what is the revenue, the per patient revenue right now? And so that you can do some really good diagnostics on your revenue streams. Then when you do that, then, and as you establish where you'd like to go, the next piece of it is, who do you want to work with?
Who would you enjoy treating? That can produce that. That's a key. If you don't like to do surgery, don't do surgery. If it's yeah.
And that's a big thing. I mean, there are a lot of ways to make very, very good revenue. So there's not just one way of doing it. So to do things that you don't like to do with people you don't enjoy spending your time with sounds to me like long-term suffering. And I'm not into long-term suffering. So pick, who do you like working with? And then you start identifying, how do you expand your revenue based upon, where am I now? Who do I want to work with? Where do I want to get to? And there's not going to be just one strategy for doing that. It might be one strategy might be that you are going to increase your revenue per patient, but it might also be that you're going to bundle some things and you're going to provide some offerings in a different way. That's a bit of what you've done with some of your educational programs. You're now able to scale and reach many more people, and it becomes very cost effective. And maybe the fee that they pay is going to be reduced, but by bundling it, what happens for you is the revenue goes up. So it becomes it becomes a really good strategy for you. But I think that those are some of the things to take a look at. These are the things that I look at for my business. It is like when I talked about boundaries, some of the boundaries, I won't work with anybody I don't like. I just, life's too short. I just don't like working with jerks. And I have a no a-hole rule in my company. My whole team knows it. It's like, if we don't like somebody, it's like, we're not going to do that. But the other thing, and I filter all the opportunities that we look at, I also filter it through whether or not it's scalable. And if it's not scalable, it's not a big enough opportunity for me. And I would say that is something that I would say has become a really important criteria for me. I'm going to say in the last 5 to 8 years. Before that, I wasn't thinking that way. I was just thinking about, driving revenue in a different way. So now at this stage of my career, I really look at scalability. I look at growth from the standpoint of, how do I grow and have it not require more of my time and my effort. So I'm all about growth, but I don't want to work any more than I am.
I just want to freeze on that point, Teresa, because I think it's very important for those that are listening. So what you said is Jay Abraham has a similar theory of, I think he calls it the Colosseum, or these pillars. So what you're saying is you have to have multiple ways. One way is maybe increasing each patient value 10%, bundling things, have them come back more frequently, a newsletter, all these things. So there's not one magic bullet to make your practice grow. It's all of these. But what I think is what you mentioned, which I think is key, we get so busy working on different ones and we don't realize, well, what's scalable without us? Like, I can scale things that only I know how to do, but there's no benefit, because if I'm not there, it's not going to produce anything. Whereas if you can automate, like one of the things that we automated recently, I've been busting my head to figure out how to do it. It is it's a newsletter that goes out to all the referring doctors. So we have this list in our EMR, and it's like 400 doctors, and everyone talks about newsletters. And I didn't want to send one to every patient, but now I'm sending one once a month. But it's scalable because I don't have to do anything.
Right.
Like, the other guy does it, and it's like super cheap, like maybe $600 for 400 newsletters to every single primary care. And then we just compare the numbers. So it's scalable, it's automated, And like these types of things in your practice, it's not don dependent or doctor dependent. And that's
Right.
the key. That's how you can scale things a lot more. Another thing is with our medical records now, we can hack, I call it hacking them. Every time someone makes a new office visit, they get a text message with it's called a welcome packet. Basically, it's what Dan Kennedy talks about as a shock and awe package. It's like a 300-page PDF of everything that I've done, and it overwhelms them, but they get that. So it prepares them to see me. And just like you, before you go see a client, if you wow them before you show up, they're going to say, wow, Teresa is this wonderful person. And for us, if they see that, oh, he's got like 300 videos on this and wrote this book on this, and then I go see him, I'm still the same person, but their impression. So how are ways that you can do that? Do you have any, as we finish up, any ways to do that? I know Robert Ringer talks about that, making the impression before you go to visit a client. How do you do that, or what's worked for you?
Well, one of the things, this is one of the things that we always focus on. And it's also what we work with our clients to focus on too. And this is to focus on the problem that you're solving. What is the experience, the people you're communicating? What's the experience that they are having? And we all are trying to solve problems. We've all got pain points that we're trying to fix. And yet what happens is when we're communicating, what we communicate about are our services. Let me tell you what I do. Let me tell you about me. Let me tell you about what and it's all focused on ourselves instead of here's how I can solve this problem that you're facing. And when we take our orientation and we shift it, and this is, by the way, this is the whole foundation of how we work with our clients and their communication, is shifting the orientation. So it's not focused on yourselves, but it's entirely focused on others, and that you are focused on being a problem expert. You know their problem better than they know it, and they may have identified it. I mean, this is as a medical practitioner, you know that people come in with all their symptoms, and you can look and go, that's not the problem. You want that pain to go away, but that pain's not going to go away until you take care of this issue, underlying issue. And when you can focus on taking the pain away and solving for the underlying condition, and that's the conversation, instead about, let me tell you about me. Let me tell you about what we do. Let me tell you how long we've been in practice. Let me tell you how smart I am. Let me tell you about all of my credentials. When you do that, you're focusing in the wrong place. So any of those communications, to make that shift, have it be about them. And then they're gonna respond, because that's what they're really trying to do.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Teresa, this was really fun. I appreciate your time. I'm going to leave people with a good, like, wanting more. So maybe we'll do it again. Any resources or things like that you'd like to share with the listeners?
Absolutely. We have anybody who is focused on being better in their communication as they are, whether it's in the practice or expanding it and being more scalable, or in with their staff, or even at home. We have a complimentary scorecard that contains all of the characteristics of rock star communicators. So they can have access to that. And then on our social media, if they want to follow Connect to the Core on Instagram or LinkedIn or Facebook, any of those places, constantly providing other communication tips and how you can expand your business on those locations.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate really great tips. Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you. Thank you.